आनंद कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की नाम आचार्य हरिदास श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री आदित्य सभी गौर भक्त वृंद की श्री राधा कृष्ण गो गोपीनाथ श्याम राधा गिर गोवर्धन की जय, श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय, मायापुर नवदीप धाम की जय, जगन्नाथ चक्रवर्ती धाम की जय, मंगलमयी लोकमयी की जय, तुलसी देवी महारानी की जय, राम विदवक्त वृंद की जय, और गौरी प्रसन्न की जय, और गौरी प्रसन्न की जय, और गौरी प्रसन्न की जय, और गौरी लोग गौरी संत श्री गुरु श्री गौरव ओम श्री
Let us speak of our spiritual milestone, of the only way in which we attain pure devotion to ourselves. I bow down to his lotus feet with grateful and reverence. By his grace, one can cross searching and still suffering, attaining mercy to Krishna. Only wish to remember consciousness of the Lord, and those connected with his lotus feet. Attachment to his lotus feet is perfection up to those all his eyes. Open to my darkened eyes and keep my heart and turn to him in knowledge. Is my Lord God and brother. He sat from eminence, but he begins to destroy. They the scriptures of his character. Our spiritual master is worship of mercy. When the people of God are master of virtues, our master is merciful to us, looks at the shade of diversity, but he looks like the way all over the world, to take shade of diversity. Srila Prabhupada.
Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivakacharya Astadata Satasi Simad Abhay Charnarvinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivakacharya Astadata Satasi Simad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhana ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Maya Pradam ki jai. Tulasi Devi Bhakti Devi ki jai. Samaveda Bhakti Vinda ki jai. Sri Harinam Sankirtana ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Let's see. Can you hear this, or is it just coming in my ear? Where is it coming out of? Okay, what a trick. This might be better than the original arrangement, right? I mean, you might have discovered something really good. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Readings from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26, Texts 23 and 24. Mahatadvad Vikurvanad Bhagavad Virya Sambhavat Kriya Saktir Ahankaras Shri Vidha Samapadyata Vaikarikas Taijasascha Tamasascha Yato Bhava Manasaschandriyanam Cha Bhutanam Mahatam Api Bhutana Mahatam Api. Somebody else? Mahatadvad Vikuranad Bhagavad Virya Sambhavat Kriya Saktir Hankaras Trividha Samapadyata Vaikarikas Taijasascha Tamasascha Yato Bhava Manasas Indriyanam Cha Bhutanam Mahatam Api Mahatattva Vikurvanad Bhagavad Virya Sambhavat Kriya Shaktir Ahankaras Trividha Samapadyata Vaikarikas Taijasascha Tamasascha Yato Bhava Manasasindriyanam Cha Mutanam Mahatam Api Mahatattva Vikurvanad Bhagavad Virya Sambhavat Kriya Shaktir Hankaras Trividha Samapadyata Vaikarikas Taijasascha Tamasascha Gvavadavya Manasas Chindriyanam Cha Bhutanam Mahatam Api Mahatadvada Kurnanad Bhagavad Virya Sambhavat Kriya Saktir Hankaras Trividha Samapadyata Vaikarikas Taijasascha Tamasascha Yato Bhava Manasasindriyanam Cha Bhutanam Mahatam Api Mahatattvat. From the Mahatattva Vikuranat, undergoing a change. Bhagavat, actually it's Bhagavad Virya Tattva, evolved from the Lord's own energy. Kriya Shakti, endowed with active power. Ahangara, the material ego. Trividha, of the three kinds. Samapadyata, sprang up. Vaikarika, material ego in transformed goodness. Taijasa, material ego in passion. Cha, and. Tamasa, material ego in ignorance. Cha, also. Yata, from which. Bhava, the origin. Manasa, of the mind. Cha, and. Indriyanam, of the senses for perception and action. Cha, and. Bhutanam Mahatam, of the five gross elements. Api, also. Translation. The material ego springs up from the Mahatattva, which evolved from the Lord's own energy. The material ego is endowed predominantly with active power of three kinds: good, passionate, and ignorant. It is from these three types of material ego that the mind, the senses of perception, the organs of action, and the gross elements evolve. Please repeat. The material ego springs up from the Mahatattva, which evolved from the Lord's own energy. The material ego is endowed predominantly with active power of three kinds: good, passionate, and ignorant. It is from these three types of material ego that the mind, the senses of perception, the organs of action, and the gross elements evolve. Purport by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In the beginning, from clear consciousness, or the pure state of Krishna consciousness, the first contamination sprang up. This is called false ego, or identification of the body as self. The living entity exists in the natural state of Krishna consciousness, but he has marginal independence, and this allows him to forget Krishna. Originally, pure Krishna consciousness existed, but because of misuse of marginal independence, there is a chance of forgetting Krishna. This is exhibited in actual life. There are many instances in which someone acting in Krishna consciousness suddenly changes. In the Upanishads, it is therefore stated that the path of spiritual realization is just like the sharp edge of a razor. The example is very appropriate. One shaves his cheeks with a sharp razor very nicely, but as soon as his attention is diverted from the activity, he immediately cuts his cheek because he mishandles the razor. Not only must one come to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness, but one must also be very careful. Any inattentiveness or carelessness may cause a fall down. This fall down is due to false ego. From the status of pure consciousness, the false ego is born because of misuse of independence. We cannot argue about why false ego arises from pure consciousness. Factually, there is always the chance that this will happen, and therefore one has to be careful. False ego is the basic principle for all material activities, which are executed in the modes of material nature. As soon as one deviates from pure Krishna consciousness, he increases his entanglement in material reaction. The entanglement of materialism is the material mind, and from the material mind, the senses and the material organs become manifest. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Chinamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskachade Shantarine. So basically, this verse and purport are explaining that the material world operates under these three gunas or modes, which are, we've pretty much heard them every day, every time we've given class on this, but we can hear it one more time. Good to remember. Sattva, or goodness, which is characterized by purity, illumination, knowledge, happiness, peace, harmony, and virtue. And a person who is predominantly influenced by this mode is free from sin, feels satisfied in their life experience, and has an elevated consciousness. Foods in the mode of goodness are wholesome and healthy, like fresh fruits and vegetables and whole grains. Pretty much what we eat here at the farm. A person in the mode of, under the influence of the mode of passion or rajas is instilled with many desires, ambitions, and attachments, is materially active, often very greedy, is restless and never truly satisfied for very long. And this mode binds a person to material activity, causes distress, fuels frantic and impulsive action without deep thinking or consideration. And a person influenced by this mode is excessively focused on material gain. Foods in the mode of passion are typically foods that are too bitter, too sour, salty, hot, pungent, dry, and burning, and end up causing a person distress, misery, and disease. The qualities of the mode of tamas or ignorance are darkness, delusion, foolishness, laziness, madness, sloth, illusion, and lethargy. This mode causes confusion, bondage, and attachment to the mundane. Foods that are considered in the mode, considered tasty in the mode of ignorance are decomposed or fermented foods, meat, fish, and eggs, alcohol, or any kind of intoxicants. So these three modes are active forces in the material world that shape our character, which then shape our actions, our attitudes, and our experience in life. And a person under the influence of a particular mode is expressed through their attitudes, actions, and desires. And this keeps them entangled in the cycle of birth and death. However, if a person engages themselves in spiritual practices that cultivate the mode of goodness or sattva gun, they eventually transcend all these three modes and awaken to their eternal spiritual nature. So there is actually, this is not considered a mode, but there is a fourth platform of consciousness called the Shuddha Sattva state, which is a state of pure goodness where a person's consciousness is absorbed in Krishna. It's free from contamination of the three modes of material nature. And this Shuddha Sattva state of consciousness actually leads a person to a life of eternal bliss and knowledge, which is one's original pure consciousness. And this consciousness state is also called the Vasudeva platform of consciousness, although it's most often known as Shuddha Sattva. So sometimes we talk about a person who is suffering in the material world as a drowning man. We used to, back in the old days, when we were just a few of us living in New York, we used to do street theater of this concept. We'd dress up and do a street theater to try and communicate a philosophical point, but also to attract attention so people would stop and listen. And so someone would play the role of a drowning person, they would be swimming, drowning in the cement sidewalk in New York, and another devotee would be trying to rescue them in this play. And so the person trying to rescue them would throw a rope or a lifesaver, I don't know what you call them here, inner tube, something to try and save them from drowning. And as it often happens in real life, that when a person tries to save a drowning man, if you've ever studied being a lifeguard and you've had to go and save somebody who's actually drowning, it often happens in real life that when a person tries to save the man who's drowning, instead of grabbing hold of the rope or the lifesaver, they start fighting with the person who's come to save them. They're so fearful, or they're so deluded by their panic that they are just pushing away the person or the cause that will get them out or save them from drowning. And they can't recognize, because they're traumatized by the panic, they can't recognize that the person who's trying to save them is actually doing so in their best interest. They're thinking that they're coming to harm them. So in the same way, we may try our best to rescue a person who is on the verge of destroying themselves by their attitudes and behavior, and instead of grabbing hold of our offer of help or salvation, they fight against our help, defend against, push away, seeing it as harming them. So this is something to be overcome, and why it's so important to be tolerant, because we understand when people are in ignorance, or they're deluded, or they're fearful, or they're wounded, often they don't trust that what you're trying to offer is helpful. They're always thinking that you're trying to hoodwink them into becoming converted to the Krishna. So something, there's a lot of fear surrounding that. You're only feeding people because you're trying to pull them in to make them Krishna conscious, or there's something in the food that's going to make you like to chant. And there's all kinds of, you've all heard many of these things, and it's not news to us. So just to give us an idea how we come to get ourselves entangled in the material world, Prabhupada tells a story, and you probably, some of you older folks probably have heard this before, but it's a very instructional story about a simple sadhu who lived a very strict life of renunciation. And he was focusing only on his spiritual practice, living in a small hut in the forest. And he only had two loincloths. So he would wash one daily and hang the other one on a tree to dry. So every day he had a clean one, he could dry it. So one day he went out to get his dry loincloth, and he found that some rats had chewed some holes in it. This was called a kopin, a spare loincloth. It's a kind of it serves the purpose, a small cloth that serves the purpose of conventional underwear that many sadhus also wear. So this renounced sage, went to town, he begged the villagers for a new kopin because he really needed two. And the villagers advised him, well, you need to get a cat to keep the rats away so it does not happen again. So, taking good advice, the sadhu gets a cat, and he begins feeding it milk, which he had to beg for in the village. He had to beg to get the milk to feed the cat to keep him from to keep the rats away from biting holes in his kopins, his loincloth. So this really proved to be difficult every day to go to the villagers and beg. So the villagers suggested, well, why don't you get a cow to provide a steady supply of milk for himself and the cat? So the sadhu gets a cow. But very soon he realizes that he needs to get some straw or grass to feed the cow. So then the villagers tell him, you need to cultivate the unused land near your hut, to grow the grass to feed the cow, to give the milk to feed the cat, to keep the rat from eating your kopins. So, you can see where this is going, bit by bit. One little inconvenience, now we have to get something else to satisfy that inconvenience, and now you're growing into this sage who is happy sitting under a hut with his two little kopins. Now he's developing a farm, and it grows and grows to the point where now he needs laborers and a barn to store all the produce. And eventually he becomes this big landlord. And to manage his increasingly complex household, now, and all the affairs related to the farm, now he even needs a wife to look after all this stuff, and he becomes a busy householder, completely immersed in worldly life. So many years later, the sadhu's busy, completely immersed in managing all of these things just to keep the kopins from getting rats eating them. Many years later, the sadhu's guru returns to the area where he was living and was surprised to find the enormous house where his disciple's simple hut used to be. So the guru starts asking, where is this ascetic disciple who used to live in this hut? And then the disciple himself, he comes out from behind his enormous house, and he's very, very shameful and embarrassed, and he prostrates himself and his guru to his guru, and then the guru asks, how did this happen that your little hut turned into this big farm? And the disciple replied, my lord, it's all for the single piece of loincloth that this happened. So the moral of this story is that one desire inevitably leads to another desire and another one and another one, and eventually trapping a person in this cycle of material desires and attachments and diverting them from the spiritual path of detachment and self-realization. So this is a practical example of how our mind leads us to make choices that eventually entangle us in the material world. Now, to be fair, there's another side to this. That sounds like a really, kind of a hopeless thing. But what isn't said in this story that we can add to it is that although the lesson to be learned in this story is to see how we get to where we are in our material circumstances, most people are not actually able to suddenly give up everything and live in a hut dressed only in their underwear. And that's not the goal of Bhakti Yoga, the goal of life is now I should sit in my underwear in a hut by myself and chant Hare Krishna. But rather, the goal of Bhakti Yoga is to see everything in the material world as is to see everything in the material world, is not to see everything in the material world as just matter. And therefore we should give it up because we're afraid of getting entangled. That's not the goal. Rather, Bhakti Yogi sees everything in the material world as Krishna's property and uses it all in Krishna's service. So in the case of this simple sadhu, who gradually became a landowner with cows and servants and a wife, if he were to have been a Krishna Bhakta, he could have used all that property and all those assets in Krishna's service and made progress in his own spiritual life. And not only that, he could have inspired everyone who lived or worked with him to become aware that everything belongs to Krishna. And in this way, it could have become an ashram for self-realization instead of just a entanglement. So this is the path of bhakti, which is very different than the path of trying to be liberated. The path is just to love Krishna, to recognize that everything belongs to Krishna, and use all of that in Krishna's service. So in this way, the material world actually becomes redeemed. It becomes reinstated in its constitutional position as an instrument to serve the source of life, or God, and to help us reconnect through that service. In fact, we should be so entangled in Krishna's service that you become eternally held and protected by Krishna's loving embrace. That you're so absorbed and entangled in doing service for Krishna, you don't have time to think of forgetting Krishna. You're just so busy remembering. Your service helps you remember. So this concept can be really confusing for people in the material world who have a material vision, because sometimes the activities of bhakti yogis are very similar to the activities of the materialist. For example, we see in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there are examples of great devotees like who are very intimate disciples of Lord Chaitanya, who are kings or they're medical doctors like King Prataparudra and Murari Gupta. That's just two of other examples. And socially, a sannyasi is not supposed to associate with such persons due to the risk of their becoming influenced by their material opulence. And sometimes the devotees of Chaitanya would criticize them as materialistic people. But Lord Chaitanya defended them because he understood their intentions by how they used their opulences. So, he was very aware that these personalities, they were not just materialists, they were pure devotees of Krishna who were using, and they knew how to use responsibly all of Krishna's energy that has been given to them. So for example, Murari Gupta was a medical doctor who was very wealthy, and he used his money to maintain the devotee and the community. And therefore, because they used the fruits of their labor, of all their work, it all became devotional service. So this is the magic of devotional service, that it purifies our consciousness in such a way that we start to see everything in relation to Krishna. And that's the real meaning of yoga, to connect everything to God. So when we see anything as separate from Krishna, that is what keeps us entangled in this material world. It's our consciousness, that's our perception. And when we can see everything, our possessions, the people in our lives, everything that happens to us is given to us by Krishna to increase our understanding and to develop our love for him, then the so-called material world transforms into the spiritual world. And therefore Prabhupada called it Vaikuntha, wherever people were using everything in God's service. Now, the flip side of this is that when we perceive the material world as meant solely for our pleasure alone, our misidentification with material energy makes us delusional, because we are not the source of all life, nor are we the creators of this material world, nor are we the controllers of it. And we can see clearly on a daily basis that life typically does not go the way we want. We can have a million plans the night before, and we wake up and things have suddenly changed, like somebody may have taken your microphone stand. I bet nobody thought of that until they got here. Oh no, who could have done that? And I came into the Krishna pad this morning, and a table was gone that I've been using for months to wash my plates near the ladies' bathroom. It's like, where did that go? But life is changing, and our illusion is that we can actually stop it. We can't control it. Things happen. And that very quickly shows us who we are as vulnerable, finite living beings. So if we can make this little shift in our consciousness from the notion that we're the controllers and the enjoyers in this world, to the notion that we're actually servants of Krishna, the source of this material world, then it opens up a portal to a completely different life experience. And it really just takes a little effort to remember this truth, which is best done by hearing and chanting the Lord's holy name and engaging in activities that awaken our remembrance of who we internally are. So the final point I want to make on this whole entanglement and being involved in the material world is that there are two types of Maya. We always throw this word around, a Maya Devi and stuff, but there's actually two ways Maya is expressed, or two types of energies. One is called Mahamaya, which is also known as Durga Devi, who is actually the material energy of Lord Krishna. And Mahamaya acts as the superintendent of the material world, and she manages the creation, preservation, and destruction under Krishna's direction. She binds the conditioned soul to this world, but also protects devotees by punishing demons, and her worship is a temporary step toward surrendering to Krishna for permanent liberation, as she is his powerful energy, but subordinate to him. So when I was living in India, we did a lot of traveling in the Himalayas, especially when it was hot in Vrindavan. And I was surprised because, we don't relate in the West to these words like Durga Devi and worshiping the Ma. And there is a significant number of folks, particularly villagers in India, who worship Durga Devi, and part of the reason why they worship Durga Devi or the material energy is because they know that she is the one who protects or punishes demons, but she also awards temporary assets or facilities. It's not quite getting to surrender to Krishna for permanent liberation, but it's a step in the right direction for people who are materially absorbed. So when people worship Durga, she may grant them temporary benefits like wealth or fame, even though true liberation comes only from surrendering to Krishna. She is very powerful, revealed manifestation of the Supreme Lord's energy, who serves as a very vital, although temporary, function within the cosmic order. She's always under Krishna's ultimate control, but she serves this function to keep people away who are not sincere. She carries this trident. Maybe you've seen Durga. I think she rides on a tiger, and she has this trident, this three-pronged trident. And each of the prongs, they represent or symbolize the different modes of material nature. And when a person is under the influence of these three modes, she pokes them with her trident to wake them up to the reality that they are actually victims, not masters of their material lives. So the poking and prodding and kicking by the modes of nature in the material world, it helps a person to finally get it, that they need to turn to God who's in their own hearts, which is where the source of happiness is. We're trying so hard to find happiness in love, friendship, society, fame, profit, distinction. Somehow or other, it doesn't last, or something happens that it's not quite exactly what we wanted. And so these are the way material energy deludes us and then smacks us. He draws us in and then gives us a kick. Prabhupada gives the example of mosquitoes or gnats or midges, and they at night when all the lights are off, they are attracted to the light. We have tons of these bugs all over the Krishna pad, in the morning. And then you see them, they're all bzzz around your lamp, and in the morning they're just dead under your light. He said, that's us. The conditioned soul is attracted by all these glimmer of light. But in the morning, the closer you get burnt, and then you're dead in the morning. But this is how we get confused. We're reaching for that which cannot really give us lasting happiness. The other Maya energy of Krishna is called Yoga Maya, And Yogamaya is the Supreme Lord's internal spiritual energy that facilitates loving devotional service and arranges his divine pastimes in the spiritual world. And this enables pure devotees to experience transcendental loving relationship with Krishna. So Yogamaya creates spiritual sentiments like those of the gopis, which appear material but are purely spiritual. Yogamaya orchestrates Krishna's pastimes, ensuring that the proper spiritual environment and participants like arranging Krishna's birth and the gopis' love for him. So while Yogamaya connects a person to Krishna, Mahamaya or Durga is the material energy that binds conditioned souls to the cycle of birth and death through illusion and material desires. Both Krishna's energy, but they both have a different function. Yogamaya is the spiritual power that brings a devotee to Krishna and into the spiritual world, whereas Mahamaya keeps a person away from the spiritual world by entangling them in the material world. So why, who could ask, why would Krishna's energy deliberately try to keep us in illusion and entangle us in the material world if Krishna is actually wanting us to come back to him? I mean, that's the whole lesson in this world, is that, you know, you try this and that, and finally you get it, that really the only way to find eternal happiness is to turn to Krishna. But so Maya's a pure devotee of Krishna. Why would she do that to keep us away from Krishna? But her job really is to keep those who are not sincere and are having pure desires out of Krishna's realm. She's the gatekeeper. So her job is to test the living being, to ensure that they have learned the lesson of the material world, to see whether they are trustworthy enough to allow them into the spiritual kingdom. So when we take shelter in Krishna's temporary external illusory manifestations by desiring to enjoy or control the material energy, seeing it as separate from Krishna, then we're put under this control of Maya. So we might get our desires fulfilled, but there's always a catch. There's always a hook in it. You know, it's never exactly what we wanted. You know, there's always something, yeah, we got it, but, you know, not so much. However, if we sincerely desire to love and serve Krishna, Yogamaya now steps in, and she gradually guides us out of this forest of illusion and gives us insights into our true nature and how to engage in an authentic, loving relationship with Krishna. And this means that when we have taken shelter of Krishna's spiritual energy in the form of Yogamaya, whatever happens to us is no longer simply karmic reaction orchestrated by Mahamaya or Durga to punish us. Sometimes it feels like that when things happen, particularly when we take shelter of Krishna. We know we're making progress. We have some residual karma to burn up, so sometimes we feel like we're being punished, we're the victim, it's being done to me and it's not fair. But rather, when we have actually taken shelter and we're making a sincere endeavor to serve Krishna, when things happen, it's actually tailor-made for us. It's an experience meant for us to learn from. It's different than just punishment. It's like, okay, what can I learn? What is Krishna trying to show me here? And the more we choose to take shelter of Krishna's spiritual energy by hearing and chanting and remembering him, the more Yogamaya opens our eyes with the torchlight of knowledge, which actually awakens our eternal pure Krishna consciousness. I'm going to stop here and invite questions and comments. Maybe you want to add something. As you were listening, maybe something came up, an idea that you'd like to share. Please share. This is a time to discuss a very rich topic.
Hey, Bob, I just had a question about the three modes of material nature that you mentioned. So one has an inclination to work in a certain way, and he might become, interested in spiritual life and become purified. But it seems like he still maintains that inclination to work in the same way throughout his life, even though he's getting purified. Because you see, devotees become purified, but they don't necessarily become scholars or. So in a sense, they somehow or other still maintain that inclination, which is in, whatever mode it is. So I'm just sort of wondering how, because we say we have to come to the mode of goodness, but it seems like you can still connect to the Lord from your occupation, even if it is in a lower mode?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there are different paths for different people, and people are at different stages in their process. And what I'm thinking as you were talking of someone I know in New Vrindavan who was there in the early days when the farm was just dirt and tractors and trying to build stuff. And he was a dumper driver. That's what he did all day, is digging up roads and buildings and stuff. And all day while he was doing that, he had Prabhupada lectures plugged into his ears while he's, for 8 hours, 12 hours. And that's all he did. His mind was absorbed in that and tractor driving, And so eventually he became so conversant in our philosophy that people's, everything that came out of his mouth was so incredibly enlightened and profound. People were like, wow, you should stop driving the tractor and come in and give us class because you're the most conversant person on the farm. So that's what he did. Now he's a sannyasi today who's still living in New Vrindavan. He still loves to drive the tractor, but he doesn't do that so much anymore. He's an old man like me. But there are other folks too. You might say, for example, a woman like me. I started out in Krishna consciousness as a mom and a cook. I cooked for 30 years. I loved doing that. It was my source of shelter. When I would get in front of that cooker, I was in my zone, and my biggest problem in life was, who's going to cut my veg? Who's going to clean my thing? That was my suffering. And then, I moved to India. I was there for a while. Women weren't really doing that cooking in the kitchen. We were not allowed to do that. It was not, I was cooking for hundreds of people, so it shifted. And, then I had to do something else. I started traveling with a bunch of brahmacharis and book distribution and that kind of thing. And then somehow or other, I had done every service there is to do, and I kept thinking, well, where else can I grow? I had questions. So I think there are people who just stay in their same occupational duty their whole life, and that doesn't mean that they don't become pure devotees or they're a stock. It's very helpful to do a repetitive work because then you don't have to think about it. When you're learning a new thing, it's a whole lot of things, and it's a wonderful way to dovetail it or use it in Krishna's service. As soon as you now connect it or use it, whether it's cooking for preaching, cooking for devotees, that's a wonderful way. Even though it's maybe a natural thing, it was kind of a natural thing for me to love cooking. I was thrown in the kitchen to do that. But eventually, you have somebody who service because that's what they love to do, so they do that for Krishna. But over time, through doing it repetitively, over time you kind of get detached. Okay, I've done that, I love doing it, but I don't need to do that because a Vaishnava can do any service. You're happy just to do service. Doesn't matter whether it's cooking or whether it's cleaning or whatever, you're just happy to make that connection. And I think that's kind of where it moves. You're now engaging other people and teaching them because we're a preaching movement. So whatever service you do, you may do it yourself, but then each one teach one. Now it becomes a preaching endeavor, and now you're really entering into the zone of Vaishnava, which is somebody who shares what they've learned in the parampara. So it doesn't really matter where you are situated. You can use it as a preaching opportunity for people. Does that make any sense? Yeah. Stephanie.
Hi, thank you for class. I was just wondering, is Durga and Mother Bhumi the same, and if their energy is different from each other?
Oh, that's a really good question. Of course, we have personified Mother Bhumi, the earth, in the story of her complaining to Brahma that she's being a burden. I think all of these energies are Krishna's energies, and they're manifesting in different ways. And I think that we have names for the different ways that they're manifest, just to keep them separate. I think that's part of the Hindu paradigm. But essentially, you would have to say you have Earth planet, but then you have material energy, which would include all planets. So when you're talking about Mother Bhumi, you're probably talking about this Earth planet. You're talking about the material energy. You're talking about energy that is pervading, or an energy that's in all the universes and all the planets, because there's a gazillion planets. If that makes sense. This is just my take on it. I will ask the pundits in the back. Maybe Ikshwaku has something, or you have anything you want to say about that? You want to say something more about that? Here, get him the mic so he can, because people at home want to know his insights.
More or less, you're correct. I mean, Mother Bhumi is the personification of the Earth planet, but Durga Devi is a manifest, basically a manifest expansion of Srimati Radharani, but she's the like in charge of the material energy. You know, so like Krishna has so many different energies, but predominantly material and spiritual. So Radharani or Haladini Shakti is one manifestation. The spiritual and the material is Durga Devi. So we have to be careful that we're not thinking that it's all one but different manifestations. I mean, they're individual personalities, but they're under the guidance of Krishna, ultimately.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Does that make sense? You have another question? Comment?
So if you're working with Mother Earth, Mother Bhumi, is it still within the 3 modes of nature?
You know, it depends completely on your consciousness. In everything you do. You know, you're working with earth, you're working with cultivating earth. If you take care of the earth, she takes care of you. If you exploit the earth like we're doing now most places, you're going to find yourself in trouble, because the earth can't take care of you if you're abusing her all the time, right? So it really has to do with the way you're treating and the attitude by which you're engaging with the earth that makes it material or spiritual. If you're using everything in the earth for Krishna, the fruits of the earth, the gemstones, the plants, the vegetables that are coming from it, then that's pure devotional service. So but if you're just taking and exploiting and trashing and destroying, that's tamas. That's demonic. You know? Anybody?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the... Oh, all right. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.